Hi, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jenna.
And I am your host, Holly.
And today we're ringing in the new year with a talk about imposter syndrome.
Because that is exactly how we're all feeling heading into the new year, I think.
Yeah, I find that quite accurate. I find a lot of the times we make these really big goals and then they all fall apart because we think, oh, well, who am I to say that like I get to do this thing or I get to have this experience or any of these things or meet my goals when I'm not as good as XYZ person or I'm not as productive as this person over here. And I find a lot of the times the imposter syndrome comes from the comparison game as well. So I find those two things are rather connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had talked about this fairly recently about, going back and being and looking at your goals and what you actually accomplished. So we're doing a lot of that right now, a lot of comparing, a lot of reviewing, a lot of planning, and it probably feels a bit overwhelming, maybe exciting. But I think that for a lot of people, imposter syndrome is going to heavily come in, if it hasn't already, wrapping up the year and like, what am I doing? Who am I? All of that kind of stuff. And I guess just before we really jump in, just if anyone doesn't know what imposter syndrome really is, it's basically just, you can make a guess. It's just sort of feeling inadequate, or sort of like you're going to be exposed as a fraud even though you're successful, something like that. And you might even attribute some of your successes to luck rather than hard work.
Yeah, and I definitely think too for a lot of people it's, it comes with a sense of community or the lack thereof community. So it's like looking at, for example, at least if we're focusing on, the author community in general, it's looking at the rest of the author community or it's looking at the rest of the authortube community and feeling like you don't have a place in it because everyone else is so successful. Everyone else has this, this, and this, and this. And I'm just an imposter. And some day someone's going to realize that I'm just like a fake hiding in the bushes, like, at least that's how it usually shows up for me is I feel like everyone's going to find out that I'm not that good of a writer or that, any success that I have is just luck and not because of my hard work or effort or, all of these other different things that are all these, negative voices in your head telling you that you're not deserving of things, that you're not good at things, and that people are going to one day find out all of that and it's going to ruin you.
Hmm. And I think that does get amplified a lot when you're doing something like posting on a platform like YouTube or doing a podcast where you start having, I don't want to say like a following because I'm not, personally I'm not big, but there are people who watch me, right? Like I'm hovering around 1K right now on YouTube, and you start having people who are commenting and watching and listening and giving comments like, "Oh, I love what you said about that," or something. And while the good feedback can be nice and encouraging, at the same time, it's like, do I deserve that? Did I say that right? And you start thinking like, well, maybe that thing I said wasn't really an original idea, and maybe I don't really know enough about it, and I'm not any sort of authority. Like, why should people be listening to me? And then you get into this sort of mental mess where you second guess the things that you know, sometimes based on knowing them too well, which is the thing that you kind of need to realize, I think, if that makes any sense. Because like, if you know something too well, it's extremely familiar to you, which brings on imposter syndrome when you tell it to other people, because part of that is also going to be like, well, obviously they already know this. I don't need to be educating anyone or sharing this because everyone must already know it because I'm, like, you're not vocalizing this, but it's in there somewhere. Like, well, I'm a dumbass and I know this, so everyone knows.
Yeah, I think that's such a like a thing, and especially in the authorship community, so much of it was built upon giving advice, which I think is something that a lot of people felt like they had to do, and then it
Hmm.
became really difficult for people to explain things that they kind of inherently learned through time with just the act of writing. So it's kind of easy if you took a more traditional route in learning the craft of writing by going to school or getting a degree or writing, reading writing craft books, then you can regurgitate that information that you learned. But I feel like it's different when you've learned it through applied effort and you've learned it through your betas, your
Mhm.
critique partners, through the act of writing itself, through reading, all of those different things. So then you feel like an imposter when you try to teach somebody something that you just kind of inherently know. But that's also one of the great things, at least, in this area, is that it's like it's a sign that you're competent in something, but you're just not consciously competent in it. It's running as a
Yeah.
system in the back of your mind, and by you regurgitating the information you do know and making it a way where you can teach it to other people, it actually solidifies it in your brain. So it actually makes it more conscious, and then you can actually learn and understand it better yourself by teaching it to somebody else. So it's not really, so many people, when they do that, they feel like they're an imposter and they feel like this negative feeling towards themselves. But the act of actually teaching somebody something you inherently know literally makes it better for you. And so I don't think it should ever be something where it's like, oh, well, if I'm a dumbass and and I know this information, then like everybody should know this already, so I don't need to tell anyone. I feel like if everybody ended up having that same mindset, then we would basically be gatekeeping all this information that we could be teaching to other people and making it easier for the newer writers as well, who might not know this, or maybe they took an untraditional path as well and they never came across this information before. And it's not necessarily that they're a dumbass, it's just that everyone has their own different path and they might not have come across the same exact information as you at the same point in their journey.
Exactly. And I think that's thing like often a lot of us will sort of appeal to authority, right? Like if someone has a degree, they're going to be able to teach things. So like what am I going to actually have to share without that, piece of paper? Which is funny because I mean that wasn't a thing, that hasn't always been a thing, and it shouldn't be. And a lot of the best teachers don't have that because they live it, because they know it. So being able to share information and help other people through your lived experience many times is better than learning some, system that has been created over the decades. And like it's all good, but it's different kinds of learning.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, one way, at least for people who are on more the authortube side of things, where imposter syndrome shows up. But there's, in any creative pursuit, especially when you're trying to monetize it, if you're trying to seek publication, there are so many other avenues where this imposter syndrome shows up in your life. And that is such a big topic. And I only mentioned one of them. So it's kind of crazy.
I know, it's like, where do we even like, I launch into my YouTube experience, right? Because my immediate thought for me is like, okay, where do I feel this the most right now? And it's with YouTube because it's a bit more unfamiliar, and I am sort of putting myself in the place of an authority figure, which is terrifying when you aren't really like geared to do that. But yeah, with writing, then you bring that in as well, and it's just like because it's so, it's based around your talent and your creativity, and you're putting that out into the world. So like the layers of it are just insane.
Yeah, and I think too that word authority is where so much of the imposter syndrome comes into. And I think you can't really have imposter syndrome without that sense of authority in a community. Because I feel like,
Yeah.
when it comes to authortube, there's a sense of authority of I'm teaching someone something or I'm sharing my journey. So my journey is important, right? And then,
Mhm.
knowing people are looking to you for either information, knowledge, motivation or inspiration, something like that, it gives you a sense of, you're in an authority position and you have to use that power you have knowledgeably, because you are, even with a smaller channel like ours, well, mine, yours, and ours collectively, where there is sort of like a little bit of a power dynamic there. There's you have followers, you have people who are watching you and trying to get something from you, and then on top of that, even when you're writing books, there's authority of I have readers or fans who are fans of my book, who are reading my books, and now I have an authority over whether or not basically they're going to have a good time based off of what I write, you know and that
Yeah.
goes for any content creation, any influencer, quote unquote, or any author or person who has a following or is viewable by the public, because as soon as you
Mhm.
have that sort of power dynamic going on, there's a sense of authority. And if you feel like you're not worthy of that, then there's also that imposter syndrome on top of that. It's like, well, why do people bother following me? Well, why do people bother consuming my content, reading my books? Like, what? I don't think anything I'm doing is special. And then you go and look around and you feel like everybody else in that same community is special. Even if you're not creating content, if you're just a viewer, a reader, a watcher, and you're consuming all of that, you're like, well, XYZ writes 50K words in a month every single month and publishes 4 books a year. So how could I ever write and publish a book even in 1 year? Like, I'm not even on their level. And why? It's because you're seeing an authority and they're showing you a highlight reel of their life that isn't 100% accurate.
Yes, which again brings that validity to showing sort of how things are real and not presenting something that's as polished and authoritative, because like there is reality in it. And when anytime you are looking at that person who you think is a perfect example and like, oh my god, I'm never going to be like them, like they aren't like them on social media. Like there are people who are very much like themselves. Like, you know, some people you meet online and they are the same when you meet them in person, at least their personality, but you can't help but put forward some sort of falsehood, right? Even like, and I don't mean that in a, you know, negative way. I mean, for example, on my Instagram, I make a post maybe once a month and it's very, you know, it's very aesthetic and it's very pretty. And that is such a tiny look into my actual life. Like you can look at that one post and go, oh, look at these beautiful little photos from Canmore with the mountains and the like food spread and all this. It looks so polished and great. And then she's putting books out and stuff. And like I try to look at my own stuff from that perspective to make that comparison. Like don't look at other people, because try to look at your stuff and see what you're putting forward. There's probably someone looking at you who's like, oh, look at her life. It's like that it's just not the reality, whether, you know, and it doesn't mean you're lying to people by putting that forward, but keep that in mind whenever you're comparing yourself to people, especially people with an online presence, because that is often not it at all.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, there's, you know, at least in my case, every time someone, I haven't had you say this yet, but basically every other person I've met in person from online have said that I basically act the same exact way as my videos. And so,
Yeah.
okay, so we have another confirmation.
And I've had that too. That's how it was with pay. It's like, okay, these are just, we are who we are.
Yeah. So, you know, there's certain people who show up and, you know, they make content and they are basically showing basically themselves. And then there's others people who are acting completely different than what they do in real life. Like sometimes their voice is like literally different in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But even for those people like us who, when we're presenting ourselves online and we're presenting a pretty accurate version of who we are, we're still quote unquote on. That's what I usually
Yeah.
say. We're turned on to
Yeah.
the fact that we know,
You can't help it.
yeah, you can't help it. You're like, I'm on camera, I'm on social media, I'm posing, I've got a face of makeup on, I've got, you know, something curated, I've, you know, still acting my same personality, but I'm acting as if I was in a social setting. And I feel like so many authors are very introverted, but when you make content, you have to be
Mm-hmm.
more extroverted. So when I say like you
Yeah.
have to turn yourself on, it's like, okay, the light, camera, action, like you're a more slightly energetic and public version of yourself versus like the
Mm-hmm.
introverted version of yourself is kind of taking a back seat and you become your extroverted version of yourself, but that's not necessarily who you are all the time. So I see so many people who are like, oh, I can't make YouTube videos because I'm feeling like I'm super insecure and I feel like I'm not outgoing and I don't really want to be seen, you know, all these different things. And I'm like, bitch, you ever think I did?
Yeah.
I would love to go sit at home in a snuggie, writing on my iPad on the couch like 24/7, but I feel like I have so many things to say that sometimes don't make it into books that I want to make videos and have to, you know, deal with editing and looking at my face all the time, listening to my own voice back, all of those insecurities that come with that. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
this extroverted all the time. It's literally just when I have people around me who require my entertaining skills, you know? I'm entertaining friends when they're over, or if I'm going out into, you know, public, or if I'm doing podcast, if I'm filming, like this is my on persona. And it's not that different from who I am when the cameras are off, but it's still like I'm a little bit more energetic. I talk a little bit quicker. You know, I'm not that kind of in the snuggie on the couch version of myself.
The amplified version, basically.
Yeah, just very slightly. It's not too much, I feel like, for most people who are like that, like us, who, you know, portray ourselves the way that we are. But if you always think, oh,
Mhm.
everybody is on 24/7 a day, they're having their best life, everything is always clean, they're always so energetic and outgoing, they never have bad days, like, you're never going to be happy with yourself.
No. And it's funny, there's this difference between authors who put themselves out there online and people who are influencers. I was actually just talking to my mom a little bit about this today because I have a friend who posts on YouTube but doesn't want anyone to know that they post on YouTube. Like the people who watch them know, but they don't want like their friends or family or anything like that to know. So they don't talk about it. And Pay, my fiance, he posts on YouTube because he feels he has to. He doesn't want to. And if you say to him like, "Oh, are you a YouTuber?" he will like shrink into himself and die a little bit. So it's interesting to talk about this because I think for a lot of people who go on YouTube as YouTubers, like they genuinely like it and they love doing that. They love putting themselves out there, but we're in this niche where most of us would probably rather not be doing it. But it's like the way the world is now, you have to put yourself out there and you need to create this platform and you need to, build your community. And obviously there are tons of positives that come along with it, but like authors and creatives have to push themselves more than they ever have before, whether you're posting videos or on Instagram. And with that, with the internet, we are being faced with more imposter syndrome than ever. Like it's already built in. We already have that going on. Like you hear about artistic rivalries and jealousy going back to years and years back, like Victorian era stuff, like the most dramatic jealous shit you could ever hear of in the artist community. But now it's just, speaking of amplified, it's amplified now because we are faced with so much more. Like you cannot cuddle up in a corner with your writing and your book and sort of tune that out. If you're going to be in the community and out in the world, it's going to be hitting you in the face all the time. You're going to be following people and something's going to pop up and you'll be like, "Oh my god, everything you're posting is so much better than I posted. Oh my god, you just published 2 novels this year. Like what the heck?" It's there all the time. Like the only way to avoid it is to totally shut down your social media.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And that's the kind of the problem, the balancing act we as creatives have to do is because it's like you want to be seen and perceived so your work can be seen and perceived, but you also just want to be your introverted self doing the creative stuff that you love. But then you go on social media to go and be present, to, find a community for yourself, to go and meet other like-minded people, and you're cheering them on while silently at the same time you keep to yourself, or at least I hope you keep to yourself, that you do have a little bit of that jealousy of, oh, we joined the community at the same time and they have 2 book deals and I have nothing, or oh, we
Mhm.
joined the same Discord server or the same Twitter thread at the same time, and now like they have a multi-million-dollar book deal and I'm still where I was when we met. And I think too there's a lot of times when we feel this even worse because there is a thing that's quite popular online where you build your community up around you and everyone gets excited for your book, and the second you get a book deal you unfollow everyone who's not where you are at. And that happens religiously on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, and it's really upsetting when you're that person.
You know more about the community dirt than I do. I've luckily stay away from that element of it, but that is terrible.
Yeah, no, it's like a very popular thing is that as soon as someone gets a book deal, or even if they get an agent, they go and unfollow everybody who doesn't have a book deal or an agent. And why? Because they're trying to seem like, oh, look, I have all this number of followers and I don't follow as many people. I only follow established authors now,
Oh, right,
right?
the
So
ratio.
yeah, so it's really dumb, and it's something that I definitely am not going to ever adhere to because I feel like it just hurts people's feelings for no reason. And you were uplifting these these people last week, and now you're like not associating with them. And so like if it's a natural progression, sure, but there's tons of people who like in one day will mass follow like unfollow hundreds of people.
And just imagine like the decision to do that. You have to sit down and take the time to be like, this is what I'm going to do with my day. Really?
Like, and you can curate your feed of course however you want to, but it's sad that it's
Mhm.
a habit that like that does happen when someone gets a book deal or gets an agent, or even if they self-publish their book, and they're like, debuting with their self-published book, they'll do the same thing. And it's kind of, that's one of the things people have imposter syndrome about, is that they look, oh, this person has so many followers and they're only following 10 people, they must have such a big following. And you don't know that 2 days ago they were all following each other and they're all mutuals.
That's just ridiculous. Yeah, so that's not gonna help anything when that's happening. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a very tough thing to navigate being creative on the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the comparison game and the imposter syndrome, both of those things certainly don't help the matter. I mean, we just had two big controversies over on Twitter that basically boiled down to people being jealous of other creators, specifically
Mm.
white creators being jealous of, authors of color, and making and do, doing horrible things as a response. But why? It's
Yeah.
because they had very deep, deep imposter syndrome, and they allowed that instead of just keeping it on the back burner of like, I know I feel this way and I shouldn't feel this way. So I'm going to do everything in my possible power to make myself not feel like an imposter. I'm going to do everything possible to uplift my community. I'm going to do everything possible to make myself feel worthy of the opportunities that I have. Instead of doing that, they took it out on authors of color and other authors around them. And we see this, unfortunately, all the freaking time, where someone feels insecure and then they make it everyone else's problem. And so I feel like that's the negative swing you can take when you feel imposter syndrome, which is rife in the author community. I feel like everybody feels like an imposter. Everybody's comparing themselves to a J.K. Rowling, a Nora Roberts, a Dan Brown. They're comparing themselves. There's always someone higher up on the ladder, someone who's more beloved, someone who has more sales, someone who has
Mhm.
this that you don't have. Like, if you keep doing that, all that does is make you feel more like an imposter. And in reality, there's no way you're going to be like the number one author in the world, who's like the number one author in the world is basically J.K. Rowling, and she is despised by a vast majority of people on this planet at this point in time. So it's like even she probably looks like Suzanne Collins and is like, wow, so many people actually really love her as a person and think that she's doing really great things. And I feel insecure about myself, so I'm going to make it trans people's fault. Like, literally, even if she, with all of her gazillions of dollars, has imposter syndrome and insecure and feels that way, like she most likely does, it's not surprising that the rest of us feel pretty much the same way, and just matters of which route we go. Do we make our insecurity and our imposter syndrome everybody else's fault, or do we own it and just do everything possible to make ourselves feel better by uplifting our communities, uplifting ourselves, and doing what we can to shorten that gap that we feel like is between us and the person we're comparing ourselves with, so that one day we can surpass those people that we're comparing ourselves to, and in the process become friends with them, uplift each other, do shout outs, all of these other things, versus making everybody the bad guy, making everybody the person you're comparing yourself to. Everybody is two steps ahead of you and you're always behind. And that's sort of the decision I think every author and every creative has to make for themselves.
Yeah, and that's something I've focused on and felt really passionately about for a long time now. And I told you the details of this story when I was visiting, but to just give a rough idea of it, like I was created in the art scene of Winnipeg, and the biggest problem that was there when I was there was just that everyone was competing so much. And to different degrees, there were some people where it was just like, what you could consider like healthy competition, but I didn't feel like it was a good thing to have in a small community like that. But it was like, this isn't great, but whatever. And then you would have some people who were just downright terrible, who were out to try and ruin the careers of people who were just starting things up. Like I was doing an art event, and the whole point was to bring the community together, and there was one specific person who made it their mission to take us down. And you see stuff like that, and if you want to talk about karma, like it never goes well. That's the thing. And this particular person, they were like, taken down. I'll say that, like someone in within our community took them down in a very intense, concentrated way through just sharing their actions with the world to, display how they were behaving. And it gave them a really, really terrible reputation because they refused to just, help people, lift people up, be within the community. Instead, they just wanted to attack and bring other people down. And it didn't go well for them. And like, I know last I heard, it's still not going well for them. And it's been like over a decade since that happened. Like the waves, they ripple out and they ripple out. And it's just insane because like you can look at the creative community and say, yeah, there's a lot of other people who are really talented and it's easy to be jealous of them, or, you know, at least aspire to be like them and all of this stuff. But as many creative people as there are people out there who can appreciate multiple creative people. So you don't need to compete for like one spot. I mean, just look behind me. This is my mom's collection, but like just an example, like all of her CDs, all of her books. This is a tiny segment of it, right? You know, we all have tons of artists that we appreciate. So there is room out there for you. And the best way to function within that creative world is to be a part of your community and help other people, because that is never going to go badly. Like, I mean, if you think about it, okay, I'm good friends with this person and my deals aren't happening, but they got all these great deals. Okay, what's going to happen if you maintain that relationship? That person is going to go on, meet more people. Maybe they'll meet an agent who they can then refer you to, and you can grow along with them. Like, being supportive and in a community and helping other people, that is never going to go wrong for you. It's always going to go right.
Definitely. And I think too, you know, that's not the reason why we form relationships in a community, but it is a
No,
huge
no.
bonus. Like, it's the nice cherry
Yeah.
on top. You get a friend for potentially life out of it. You get to learn a lot from that person who might be 10 steps ahead of you. You get to then meet them where they're at eventually, and they might help, you know, lower the ladder behind them to help bring you up too. You know, they might go and make a connection for you, or they might learn something from their agent that they would then pass on to you. You know, there's tons of ways that we can help each other in a community. And, you know, as long as we stick, you know, together, even though there are these, you know, social sort of divides between someone who's unagented and unpublished to someone who's agented to someone who's published to someone who's self-published, there's all these different divisions that we can make in any community. And I think a lot of them are fucking stupid. I think the only division should be between the authors who are trying to be, at their very core at least, or, you know, outwardly trying to be good members of a community, and people who are trying to be bad members of a community and probably bigoted at the same time. That's the only division that I think there should be. There's the people who are okay saying shit, you know, like that's racist or tearing other people down just for the sake of tearing them down. All of those people can go hang out by themselves. And everybody else who's
Yeah.
trying to just generally uplift the community, I think that's a different area. And there, you know, for a lot of people, they're also going to put anybody who calls somebody else out into that bad community member
Mm-hmm.
area. But my personal thought process, at least, is I don't mind, and I obviously don't care, and I think it's appropriate sometimes for people to call out other people in a community for things they're actually doing, and things that, like, you have proof, you have receipts, you have, you know, different people have said the same thing. Like, if there's somebody who's being bigoted, if someone's being racist, if someone's, you know, a bad actor, whatever it may be, I think that's totally cool to go out of your way to call them out for it, for their bad behavior, and to change the community for the better in that way. And I feel like those people fall into that category of people who are trying to be good community members. But a lot of the time, unfortunately, they get roped in on the other side of things.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, because the whole point of a community, it's not, well, okay, it's support, right? But support extends to keeping your community safe. So letting people know when there's someone out there who is a danger to the community in some way, which is, you know, what wound up happening to this person that I knew back in Winnipeg. Like, you have to do it. And you know, there are good and bad ways to go about doing it, I guess. But in the end, if you're just saying like, here's the evidence, here's what this person did, you know, make of it what you will. Like, it's important for people to know. Like, personally, I would rather know if I'm going to interact with someone who has had like a, you know, shady past, who is going to treat me badly. Like, you can't, I think it's a disservice to let people walk around blindly if there's that kind of situation going on.
Yeah, and it's funny too, to rub this back into the imposter syndrome discussion too. I feel like
Mhm.
most of the people who don't have imposter syndrome in creative spaces are the bad actors. Not a blanket statement,
Oh,
but
no.
definitely there's some sort of comparison there. And I think it comes with there, if you have this creative person who feels like everybody's competition, and simultaneously they're better than everybody and they fear
Yeah.
anybody going to the same level as them, they will do everything possible to tear everybody around them down and make everybody at least one or two tiers below where they are, right? They're like, I'm the king or queen of this area. Like, this is my expertise. No one else gets to touch this platform or this thing other than me. And I'll go spread rumors and I'll do all of this, because they fear anybody being on the same level as them or surpassing them in where they've considered their domain, because then they fear that imposter syndrome. They fear, okay, well, what happens if someone gets more subscribers than me? What happens if someone gets more followers than me? What happens if someone's book hits more sales numbers than me in the same genre category? What if they boot me off of a bestseller list? They have this fear of feeling like an imposter, and they again make it everybody else's problem, versus going and saying, hey, I was on this bestseller list for 6 weeks in a row. This person surpassed me and now I have the number 2 spot. That's fucking sick. Like, yes, that we're in the same category. Let's go be friends. Let's go talk. Let's go do a dual book giveaway together. And rather than like cross promoting each other's stuff, becoming friends, forming a community, and forming tighter bonds with people who are in the same genre or same category or have similar audiences to you, you go and make it their problem that they're as successful as you or trying to be. And meanwhile, the other person still has imposter syndrome because they were looking up to you the whole time. And then rather than lifting the ladder up, down to them, you're lifting it up and tripping them. Like,
Yeah, 100%. The most dangerous people, the most dangerous artists I've ever met are artists with egos. And I think everyone has to have some level of ego to put their work out into the world, because obviously, like, you think it is valid enough to put out there, even if you are uncertain. Like, you need something, you need that bit of confidence, that bit of like, yeah, I think this is worthwhile, I hope. But people who go out there and they're like, I am the expert, I am the best, I know everything about this, look up to me, I'm the master, I can talk about this and like, proselytize for years and hours, like that level of confidence, ego, narcissism, those are the artists that are just like deeply unattractive.
Well, I think too, like,
And
like you were saying,
not good.
confidence is one thing, but I feel like it's that mix of the confidence with the competition aspect alongside of the fear of imposter syndrome and the fear of others that all wrap up together into this nasty, like, thing that unfortunately happens to a lot of people in every creative field. We have, artists, rappers, singers, musicians, painters. We've got, other authors. We have tons and tons of people, unfortunately, in every industry who end up exactly like that. Like J.K. Rowling is a perfect example of those things. And so it's that, it's all of those things combining. And unfortunately, we see that happen quite a lot in every single industry. But then there's also like, I wouldn't mind if someone's like genuinely very confident in their stuff and they don't feel any imposter syndrome, but it's that fear of feeling like an imposter or fear of losing for a lot of people that then turns on the ego, and that's where it ends up becoming a problem.
Yeah, and there's a defensiveness, and it's bad for them too, because like, it's not, when they do fall, it's going to be really hard, because like, we talk about how imposter syndrome is hard, like it's difficult to deal with, but it's also difficult if you don't have something like that, some level of humility that keeps you kind of real. So if you launch up into that place in a creative field where you're not in touch with reality, whether you really are doing well or you're just sort of doing well and you're pushing yourself to appear like even more than you are, if you are holding yourself up so high, when you get that chink in your armor, like, you are going to fall flat on your face and it's gonna suck. So I think that with imposter syndrome, you don't want to turn it into a villain. You want to maintain a bit of humility, but you want to learn how to deal with it, and you want coping mechanisms, and you want to be able to use it as a tool to sort of check in with yourself and stay based in reality and not let it take over your life,
AKA authors, please go to therapy.
Yeah, all that to say.
A nice summed up thing is please go to therapy. New t-shirt.
Yeah. I've started writing them
Oh,
down.
yes, good.
I have to go back now though, because I just wrote down one from our last episode. It's on our spreadsheet.
Ah, beautiful. I'm gonna open up the spreadsheet and just see all of our beautiful t-shirt designs.
They'll get there. They'll get
uh,
there. Gucky Fairy included.
I cannot wait for it to wear my Gucky Fairy shirt on the podcast.
I'm so excited. So I think that we've talked about, the various facets of imposter syndrome and ego and all of these, toxic traits that artists and creators can take on. But maybe we could just get into like how to deal with it, right? How to live with it and ways that we cope with it. So what are some of your coping mechanisms?
Well, I feel like I definitely don't have, like, when I first joined the community, I know I definitely had that kind of like issue going on, where I was always comparing myself to everybody else. And I kind of took that and made it less of, oh, I feel like shit about myself because I'm comparing myself to others. I took it more so as, putting it in a positive competition way where I'm like, okay, this person has this many more followers than me. They have this many more views. What can I do so that I can have as many as they can without, just copying them? Like, what can I do to sort of, compete with them silently to myself versus making it, again, their problem to deal with me and my competitiveness, Or even sometimes too, it's like, if I have friends who I know they're writing a lot of books, I'm like, hey, you want to do sprints? Like, rather than being upset that they're finishing books quicker than me, I'm like, hey, let's go do a sprint together so I can see how fast you write. And it's going to make me feel that nice pressure of like, okay, let me write just as quick as you. And then the final best thing you can do if none of those other things are working is just mute people. Don't block, because you never know when you're going to get over it, or when you might want like a connection with this person, or it's just a you thing, and you might one day be in a community together. But if someone's really just making you feel down on yourself, just unfollow or mute them and just like put it off to the side. Stop checking their page, stop seeing like what the stats are, all those things. Just stop doing that, because all you're doing is comparing yourself. Like, I don't try to go on anything anymore and compare my numbers to somebody else's, my views to somebody else's. I go on there and go, oh, let me check in with my friend. Let me see how they're doing. Oh, they're doing great. Fantastic. I can't wait till I'm there. I can't wait until I have that follower account. I can't wait until I've written that book. I can't wait until I've published just like they have. Oh, I love that venue that they went and they had their book launch at. I'm going to go and look for one in my area that gives me that same sort of vibe. I'm looking to get inspiration for my own author career versus going, why isn't that mine? Because I think that's one of the main things you have to remind yourself is like, if you don't have it yet, that doesn't mean you're never going to have it. It just means it's not your time yet, but it will be someday, as long as you keep doing what you're doing right now or improving what you're doing right now. But getting all bitter about what you don't have yet when the universe isn't willing to give it to you, do you think that's going to make the universe want to give it to you? Do you think the universe is going to be like, yes, perfect. Here is an award for not doing what you're supposed to be doing and just bitterly scrolling through someone else's social media and feeling horrible about yourself the entire time? That means you get a book deal. No, the universe doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I found that doom scrolling. I think cutting out doom scrolling is incredibly important. Luckily, I've never done a lot of it, but as of I guess. Oh my gosh. I think I got a bit more into it when I first started on YouTube, and when I was first exploring the author community, and I was like, "Oh, look at this new fun thing, and I'm going to like look at everything," right? And so for a year I was very like tied to things and looking at the numbers and keeping sort of on a lot of that. But for about like 3 years now, I've completely cut that out, and that gives such peace of mind. And for anyone who doesn't know what doom scrolling is, it's when you just like open up your feed and you scroll and you're not looking for anything in particular. You're just sitting there like, what's on Instagram today? Like it's not good. So I think living with intention in the world of social media is really important. Like, don't open it unless you actually have something you need to do on there. Also, using things like Facebook page manager, like the business manager, to make your posts on Facebook and Instagram. If you're trying to put posts out there, I think that's really good, because you're consolidating it and you're just on this little thing where you are making a post and you're not really on the app. So sort of disconnecting from that sort of thing. And mostly, I guess the overarching thing would just be like honing in on what you really want, and also reminding yourself that everyone's on a different phase in their journey, and not everyone's is going to be the same. So like I look back a lot, and I guess sort of meditate on, I don't want to like not literally meditate, but I will often try to just sort of sit there and put my headspace back into like, okay, what do I really want? What's at the core of these things I want? Maybe I have all these like periphery things going on right now that are bouncing around because I've been watching someone or talking to someone, and it's like, oh yeah, I kind of want that and that and that. It's like, okay, but what's at the core? What are you really trying to get towards that like you want, that's not from some sort of outside force? And I think that focusing in on that helps a lot. So quieting those voices, which isn't to say don't look at inspiration, but look for it intentionally. Like stick to what you really want. Like, okay, I want to finish editing this book and at least have like the beta draft out for people. So what is going to help me with that? And I'm going to look for things that might help me with that specifically. And then I'm going to get like a little bit of chatter come in through social media or Google or whatever, but it is still going to be very honed in. So I think that making sure that you are the person who is driving your progress is going to help a lot, because the biggest problem with imposter syndrome, like there's levels of it that, you know, therapy that therapy can help, that aren't based on outside factors, because you can just have that insecurity in yourself. Like a lot of it is that. A lot of it is just like, well, I don't know if I'm really good enough, which everyone feels in creative fields, and unless you're a psychopath. And so for those interior things, you want to do a bit more soul searching. You might benefit from talking to a therapist, something like that. But for external things, just like limit them. Don't, you know, it can be so tempting to just look at everything on the internet, because there's so bloody much stuff, and like Pinterest, like you can scroll for hours and dream about the life that you want and not actually wind up doing anything about it. So just like keep on track, minimize distractions, and focus on yourself and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, that's a key one right there, is be kind to yourself. But you could say you weren't meditating, you were marinating. You teach.
Yes. I don't meditate, I marinate.
That means there is thoughts. That's the difference. You're not trying to empty your head. You're
Yeah.
just like marinating on the thought.
Sometimes I say percolating, like a coffee maker.
Oh, there you go. That works too. Percolate. What was it? Instead of girl boss gatekeep, it's like percolate, marinate, meditate.
Meditate. Oh my god.
Yeah. But you know, I think all of that is, yeah, you said so much good stuff in there. My goodness. And I think too, it's, you know, being kind to yourself, but then also, you know, being kind to others at the same time. I think there's so many times we feel like horrible people if we have these negative feelings, like if we feel imposter syndrome, or if we feel like we're comparing ourselves to other people, or we feel like we're, you know, competitive. You know, and there's so many times in my life that I was like, oh, I hate that I'm so competitive. I hate that I get so like angry, and I get so, you know, I'm a type 8, it's a type 3, I say all the time. Type 8 is so much about justice. It's so much about like, you know, all of those different things. So, you know, when I was a younger, bitter person, I was like, I don't see how it's justified how I'm working harder and I don't have what other people have. But like, you don't see their whole stories through social media. You don't see their whole everything that they've gone through to get to that point. So of course it's going to seem like everybody has it easier than you. Of course it's going to seem like it's not justified that you don't have what other people have when you're doing the same thing. But again, if it's not your time and the universe says it's not your time, then it's just not your time right now. And there's something you still need to learn, something you still need to go through. And other people, it might be that they go and get a book deal. Here, haha, they're not ready for it. They fuck up their whole life. We just saw that on Twitter recently. You know, they lost their book. Kate Corain, she lost her whole book deal. She lost her whole everything because she was not ready to deal with her feelings of imposter syndrome, her fears, all of these different things. And she fucked herself over. And that was the universe definitely teaching her about 1,000,001 things that she didn't want to deal with. And so it's all of those things mixed together. And, you know, I think it's fine, you know, to accept that you have these negative feelings, to accept that, you know, you feel like an imposter, you're comparing yourself to others, you feel that competition, as long as you make it, hey, this is my problem of something I need to work on for myself. It's not something I need to go make everybody else's issue to coddle me or to make me feel better or to talk shit about people just so that I feel validated and I don't like this person because they have something I want. So I'm going to go talk shit about them because that's what I want to do, you know? So there's all of those different, messed up feelings you can have, but I feel like there's also ways you can make those feelings into a little bit more positive. There's, okay, I feel like I'm an imposter, so what can I do that's going to make me feel validated? Okay, well, I feel like an imposter because I don't have a book out. What can I do? I can go and finish the book that I'm writing and publish it so that I don't feel like an imposter any longer. So I have a debut novel out. Okay, well, I feel really competitive. What can I do? I can go and either just mute the people, stop doom scrolling. I can turn off the notifications on my phone for Instagram or Twitter. I can go and only purposely consume content, or I can go, hey, I actually like a little bit of competition, so I'm going to compete with myself with what my previous numbers were. Or I'm going to compete with, hey, I like what their page is doing. I like the aesthetic that they've got going on. I feel like it suits me a little bit. Let me make it my thing. And even if it doesn't necessarily get my followers up, maybe it'll still like soothe a little bit of that competitiveness, because now we have something in common that I enjoy. Hey, I feel competitive with this person. Let me actually go and befriend them. Let me go send them a DM. Let me go tell them that I like their stuff. It's all these different things that we can go and turn those negative feelings into positives rather than just stewing and marinating on our own bullshit.
Yeah. And that's a good point about making friends with someone too, because how else are you going to get to know the real history and the story to, how they got to where they are that you might feel jealous about? Like if you are able to, I mean, it's going to be hard if someone is, not very reachable, but if there's someone you admire, but that is coming out in a jealous way, try talking to them. And the fact that you admire something they're doing means you probably have something in common and you might get along, and then they might tell you, oh yeah, I made this thing, but here's everything that I went through to get to that. And you might go, oh, okay, I haven't even been through half of that shit, so maybe I need to go through some more shit until I get to that point. So like you're going to learn more about that person by being friends with them and being kind to them, and open to learning, rather than just like sitting there in your little gremlin corner being angry.
Gremlin mode. Give me shinies. I want my award.
I'm in my gremlin corner today.
Which I think too, that's another way that you can very easily, improve upon, these negative feelings that you have, this imposter syndrome and all these other things, is literally just have a gremlin day. Have a day where you're like, all
Yeah.
those angry feelings, I'm gonna give myself 2 hours to stew in all the bullshit. Wish I had my award. I'm gonna go and doom scroll. I'm gonna get it all out of my system, and then I'm not gonna do it for the rest of this quarter. I'm gonna mute everything on social media, only go on there when I need to. And I'm just gonna like, that's my time to just get it out of my system. That's what I would sometimes do, like more so about like my work life. When I used to work at really shitty places, I'd be like, okay, Steven, end of the night, listen, I just got home. We got an hour before sleep, and I'm just ripping into every person at my job. I'm just releasing the Kraken, and then I'm not going to talk about work for the next like month, but I'm just going to get it all out now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Cause yeah, I mean, we talk about coping mechanisms and getting over it and stuff like that. Sometimes the only way to get over something is to just like go through it and feel it. And even, I mean, that could even mean like, just call up your best friend and be like, we're going to the bar tonight and we were having a couple shots and I'm gonna like bitch about how jealous and pissy I am. And like maybe even go with someone who like is not connected to your community at all, so they don't like know, and then you could be like, just go off, and then you'll come home, hydrate, sleep, and get up, and maybe you'll have purged those demons a bit.
Purge the petty demons. Another t-shirt.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Great thing, but I will put a caveat to that, is I highly recommend you do it with people in person who aren't a part of the community, because there's been tons
Yeah.
of times people have purged their demons in DMs, and then people screenshot that shit and it ruins
Yeah,
a bunch of shit.
that's
So
what I mean. Don't go out. Yeah, don't record that shit.
yeah, like, and that's kind of like a caveat as well, as this totally depends on someone's filter level, but for me at least, like, I'm fairly certain no one's gonna ever be able to screenshot something I said in DMs and then like out me for shit, because anything that I've said in DMs, I would say to somebody's face. Like I would say in person, like I have zero filter and I kind of just don't give a fuck most of the time. So to be honest with you, like that's not really necessarily a problem for me. And I, even when I like bitch and moan in people's DMs about stuff, when I'm like feeling, jealous, or I'm feeling all of these different ways, I always preface it with like, I'm feeling this way and it's my fault I'm feeling this way. I completely own
Yeah.
that. and it's my thing I need to deal with, but thank you for listening to me bitch and moan about
Yeah.
this thing, you know? It's never like, hey, don't tell so and so that I'm saying this
Oh,
thing. It's
God,
like,
yeah.
no, I've gone into people's DMs before and literally been like, hey, I really love hanging out with you. I think you're a great person. I'm really happy for you, but I'm gonna need to take a step back because I feel my ugly green jealous demon rising its head. So you enjoy your time. I'll be back. A week later, I'm like, hey, I'm not feeling those feelings anymore. I did some therapy. I did some marinating. I'm all good to go. How you been? You know, like there's been tons of times I've been that and
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I'm gonna take a step back. We're good. We're good. Okay, I'm good. We're back. You know, and you don't necessarily have to go so far as telling somebody that's what you're doing. But if you're really upfront like me, that's what I do. That was someone's not wondering.
It's good because you're communicating and you know yourself, right? Like you should know yourself, and that's what a lot of this comes down to is just knowing yourself, knowing your boundaries, knowing how to communicate in here and also out here.
and and here, at least we forget on the phone, which gets so many
Yes,
people in trouble.
yes, and here too.
Yeah, I think that's too. There needs to be a connection for a lot of authors between your your brain, what's coming out of your mouth, and what's coming out of your hands on the keyboard. Because there's so many times when people think, oh, the internet's anonymous, I can say what I want, and a lot of people don't try to have platforms on those same communities, but sometimes they do and they fuck up. But it's because they're letting the green goblin come out of their hands, but meanwhile their mouth and their brain is saying something completely different. Or it's like, hey, I wouldn't say this to someone's face with my mouth, but I will type it out on my private Twitter. Um,
Yeah.
or like, hey, I'll think all of these nasty things, but then I'm not going to say it and I'm not going to type it out, but I will make my actions be based off of what I'm thinking rather than what I'm saying. And I think that's another
Mm.
aspect you have to remember too is like, okay, it's fine to have negative feelings, but I shouldn't be making other people's problems, not only with what I'm saying with my mouth or what I'm typing out with my hands, but it's also the actions I actually take. What tone of voice am I using when I talk about certain people who haven't done shit to me merely because I'm jealous of them? What kind of things am I, telling other people that I shouldn't be telling them merely because I'm upset about something? And this goes for things, period, but especially in case
Yeah.
of imposter syndrome, we tend to change our tone a little bit without noticing it. I know I'm really bad with this, but it's also because I, again, have no filter. And it's, we have to be careful about those certain things, especially if you're a person like me who, again, has no filter. But I think being careful with those things, being purposeful with those things. And if you do find a lot of the time that, like, hey, I literally cannot control my tone, I cannot control what I type when I'm feeling these negative feelings, cool, step away. You don't have to be on the internet during those pieces of time. And if you're still like, hey,
Yeah.
I know I ruminate on this, I'm obsessed with this, like I can't get over these negative feelings, then maybe you don't get to feel those feelings. And again, you need therapy.
Therapy.
Therapy. Gotta love that therapy. Yeah, and I think too, when, at least when I'm saying therapy, I know, where I live in California and where Holly lives, like for the most part, you can get mental health services for cheap or for free. But however, that's not the case for everybody in the world. So totally understand that. However, even if it's just talking to your best friend, if it's talking to your partner, if it's talking to someone in your life who you get great advice from, or someone on the internet, whoever it might be, find your version of therapy, whether it's maybe art therapy, going and touching some grass and going into nature, like whatever it might be, find your version of therapy to go and take that a little bit of that heat off of you and all of those negative feelings that you're feeling, so you can kind of free yourself to feel better feelings, to invite better energies into your life, and to be able to move on without having all of this green goblin negative shit talking in your ear.
Sometimes even and as writers, sometimes even writing a letter can help. That can be therapy. Like just, write a letter, the letter that you never send. Write the letter to the person you're jealous of or even to yourself. Write the letter. You're going to work through some stuff and then, you just rip it up or, we are a witchy podcast, burn it, do a ritual. You can do a ritual to try and release those negative energies. You can write everything that you're feeling down and just, banish that. Be like, I'm writing it down. Here it is. I've put it out into the world. I've made it physical. I'm looking at it. I'm examining it. And now I'm just going to send it away. I'm going to burn it up into the air.
Yeah, just once you do that, make sure you're 100% certain that that is what you want to do, because I've done this before and
Oh
literally
yeah.
fucked up with it because I and this was a specific case, not necessarily with jealousy, but it was something negative that I should have been feeling, but I was so tired of
Mm,
being angry that I, did sort of a banishing spell for my own feelings on the matter, and I became completely apathetic to it, and I let people do fucked up things
mm,
to me and the people around me simply because I no longer cared, and I literally could not bring myself to have empathy about the situation anymore. And so I did too strong of it, and I literally had to do a reversal spell to get my anger back about the situation. So if it's genuinely someone has fucked with you, if it's genuinely something that
oh yeah.
someone, you know, can come back into your life and fuck with your friends, or if it's something that like you feel like you could turn into a positive in a, competitive manner, in a constructive way anyways, or if it's a lesson you feel like you still need to learn, then I would say keep those things and do the
Mhm.
therapy, do the hard work and effort, because sometimes if we just jump straight to the witchcraft part, we can fuck ourselves up. And that's why I don't try to do it anymore for that specific thing, a specific reason.
But yeah, if you just can't stop obsessing over someone who's doing something you wish you were doing, you might be able to free a little bit of that stuff.
Yeah, especially if it's just like, hey, I'm really, really jealous of this person and I can't get over it. Like, just, I think that's the time, especially if they haven't done anything.
That can be set free.
Yeah, free yourself with a little bit of witchcraft.
Free yourself.
Free yourself, therapy.
I think we've covered all the things with imposter syndrome and how to deal with it, including our witchy elements.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And, if anybody's dealing with that kind of stuff, I just want to reiterate again, like the things you're seeing online aren't someone's real life, and neither is yours. Like Holly was saying, look at your own social media and how you portray yourself online. What is the vibe someone gets from looking at your content? Do you give off any hint of what you've been through? Because most likely not. And
Mhm.
so everybody has this different journey. And I think too, we get so wrapped up in, I want what they have, I want what they have, I want what they have. I feel like an imposter because I don't have what they have. I'm not at the goal yet. But isn't it so exciting to have a completely different journey than anyone else on the planet has ever had? You know? You can't go, oh, I want that thing and that thing and that thing. You're wanting things from like 15 different people you're seeing on the internet, but you want your journey and your path to be the same as one of them. That's not how that works. If you want those 15 things, you're going to have 15 different journeys. You're going to have 15 different outcomes and ways that you achieve these different things, and none of them are going to look exactly the same to those other people. But isn't that the whole point of being alive, of all of these, everything we're doing creatively? It's to go and make our own path and make our own journey, and we can't just copy paste what someone else has been through or copy and paste someone else's successes. We have to work and earn it for ourselves, because if we get it super duper fucking easily, we're not going to value it as much. We're not going to be able to share our story with other people to encourage them when they're on their own path. And isn't that so fucking exciting that our journey is unique to us? It's ours. Like, no one can
Mhm.
take that away from you. And the only thing that can, make it get taken away from you is if you stop because you feel so much imposter syndrome you can't be bothered to actually try in your journey anymore, or you let that little green devil show up on your shoulder and make you do or say terrible things that then ruins your career anyways. So just revel in the fact that all of this is completely up to you. It's completely up to the decisions you make, the feelings that you have, what you do about the feelings that you have, and you get to decide the life and journey you're going to have.
And sometimes the journey is the best part. There have been many times where I've reached the end of a goal, and the part that I feel the most nostalgic and sort of excited, and the part that I miss the most is that journey. So, live in your moment as well, I would also say.
Definitely. And I think that, if you compare it to the end of writing a book, you're like, yes, I wrote the end. That feels so good. But then when you're thinking back on your book, it's not the words the end that you're reminiscing on that you loved so much. It's all of those scenes that you had imagined that you finally put to paper. It's, oh my God, I love when I wrote the first kiss scene. I love when I wrote the big battle at the end of the book. It's not the little words, the end. It's about the whole journey you and your characters went on together to finish and write the story in the first place.
Oh, exactly. I think that's a nice, warm, fuzzy way to wrap up our imposter syndrome discussion, a topic that can definitely be difficult. So, I mean, if you're dealing with it right now, we feel you. We feel you. you can deal with it. You got this.
Yes, we're sending you all our love and positive energy out to you through the screen. And just take a big, deep breath if you're feeling any of these feelings. Let it go nice and slow, and know that your journey is special and unique to you. And we honestly can't wait to see what you do with it. So if you've been feeling any of these feelings, or if you feel like you've gone through any of these things, do let us know down below. We might have some more tips and tricks for you, or you might find some other community members who you're really excited and want to uplift together so that you both can grow on your own journeys side by side.
Yes, absolutely. Please let us know your thoughts, your feelings, everything that you thought from this episode. We hope that you got something out of it and that it was helpful on your journey.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for watching or listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.